It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first item of business is agenda. What are the board's wishes? Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, a motion second to approve tonight's agenda. All those in favor?
I have a question, quick. So 3.1, the elementary enrollment adjustment appears to be the boundary discussion. Will we be accepting community input at that time?
No.
No, okay. Can I request that we do, or?
I think we had our input last week at our meeting. Okay, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to 3.1, which is elementary enrollment. Kathy Nebor and Mary Jo.
So per the board request, superintendent provided some data for you last week. Is there any questions on that? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the information, it said open enrolled students K through 5 were 24, and I think the slideshow had said 32. Is there a...
Sure, so we gave you the most current numbers.
With the 24?
Correct.
Thank you.
So again, here's where we're currently at. And this is still the recommended shift. No change from the last two meetings that we've had. And as we've talked, the numbers still sit at around 20, 16, and 20. I think third grade right now is at 19. We have a couple of students who, of course, won't move out of the shifted area because they are in special programming. I had a couple questions on that over the last week or so. Any more questions on that? Someone had asked about moving students in and out to addresses, and we've getting those letters prepared. It's, as our principals tell us, typically a wash and doesn't really make a large dent. For Sibley, it's a gain of one student as we move students in and out who've moved over the course of the year. And Lakeview is down 2 students as a result, so for those who asked that number. So our recommendation is still to move the current K-2 students in adjusted Lakeview-Sibley boundary north of County 46, move to Lakeview. Current Sibley 3rd and 4th grade students would remain at Sibley as grade 4th and 5th graders for the 19th and 1920 school year, which is our current practice, to allow 4th graders in particular to stay, if they move in their 4th grade year, to stay 5th grade in any building. If students can voluntarily move with siblings to Lakeview, new open enrollees will be assigned where there's capacity, and then all current enrollees who have addresses outside of the school boundaries may be asked for proof of resident via utility bills.
Could I ask a question on that one? What is meant by the last bullet point when it says they have addresses out of the school boundaries? They'll be asked for proof of residence?
Sure. So as we look at the boundaries here, if I have a student who is living in that Hawthorne boundary, but they are attending Lakeview and there's not a special needs requirement, we would ask for which address are you really living in? Where's your actual home? And then we've, of course, talked about, as board members have talked about, ensuring that families who are split families, that we respect those wishes and work with those families as best we can.
Addresses via utility bills, things like that?
Yep, and then we're also using the county Beacon online maps that allows us to go in and see, and that's updated about every 4 days, is my understanding. And then that also quarterly gets dumped into our system, not daily. Synergy, which is our student information system, updates Guide K-12 every night. But the county doesn't update in our system, but we can go out and check the county system. It updates pretty regularly. I want to say about every 4 days we see if somebody comes to us and says we've moved, and then we go back and check that. So, and then again, the utility bills to find where they're living. So.
I have a question. I think I know the answer, but on the slide it was just a little confusing. So the current fourth graders will stay where they're at when they're in fifth grade, and then the ones going into fourth grade will stay there when they're fourth grade and fifth grade, not just next year, the following year as well, correct? That was my understanding.
Yep.
Just double checking.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other information or any questions that you have?
I think that one question was asked was how many kids on average move, and Angela says on average 4 kids move in and about our district every week. So when you say how come that number looks different, I mean, it's been probably 4 weeks, first week in April that we pulled those, so we're a very mobile community like most, so.
I noticed on the information that we got that it was suggested that the Lakeview area is the fastest growing, or the area that populates Lakeview School is the fastest growing area in our school district. Is that I'm sort of surprised to hear that.
So I think what it says here is Lakeview has the capacity to absorb more students in the future in our fast and growing part of the city, which is that western edge.
That is the fastest growing.
Yeah, so right now it's all Sibley, that edge. And we're asking to shift this area because Lakeview has the capacity to absorb that growth, Chapel Heights, Indian Hills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that, and I'm not debating the issue, but it seems like there's quite a bit of building and residential construction in the southwest part of town, around Wedgewood Cove, in that area.
Correct.
But there's an equal and offsetting amount of new construction and north in the Lakeview area. Evidently.
There is some construction up there, but I think what you mentioned about the Southwest is probably, it is fast growing, and this will provide a little more capacity for Sibley and Lakeview with the shift.
I know I had a chance to walk through with Diane after our meeting, and it was even a little bit more crowded than what the picture showed. It was a little disconcerting to see some of our, it was good to see our space being utilized, but when we're getting into closets and office areas for classrooms, it seemed the teachers are doing a good job of getting it all taken care of. That wasn't a problem, but it seemed like there was a little bit more activity with the kids needing a little bit more help than I saw some of them getting. Again, very organized, but you could walk in every door and you could see students, literally, and that was one of the things that I noted as I walked through too.
Okay.
I think that obviously redrawing boundaries is a hard thing. I think the solution that the district's proposing is probably the best solution. Just one comment that I've been hearing is that it would have been, if we had been able to do this a little sooner, that might have just eased some of that frustrations and anxieties and stuff. And now I think as a board, we feel a little pressed because we know things have to happen, and parents feel pressed deciding what kindergarten roundup to go to and everything. So if we just had been able to do this a little sooner, otherwise it looks like the solutions are the best possible in a tough situation.
I had the opportunity to go take a look too, and it was very eye-opening to me as well. And I keep thinking back to even the night that we had our special board meeting, just the equity piece, and all our students are not getting the same services right now, and so that's concerning for me. And I too, Angie, think that it feels like it's a little bit rushed, but as Kathy has said, we're a very transient school district, and things happen weekly. So I think we take all those things into consideration.
I guess my comments would be that from what I've heard from families throughout the process at the other, at the special meeting and correspondence, et cetera, were that they weren't pleased with the process, that the process seemed rushed. They would have liked to have been a part of the process along the way. Fairness was another issue. They want this process to be fair, whatever it's going to be. And they want kids to be in the district that is appropriate for their residents. They want to know that viable options have been considered. Clarks Grove kids, open enrollees, and something that's sustainable and something that shows forward thinking. And as I think through those issues, for me as well, the process did seem abrupt. I think this is a situation that has been coming over the years. I think it's gotten increasingly more serious. But I believe that if we would have been able to discuss it maybe even last year or earlier in this year, we could have maybe eased into the process a little bit and included more of the community in the process. And I think it's just a missed opportunity in public relations. Even not having an open comment tonight, since it's when these are work study sessions, there's no open forum, and why not have a few more minutes just to see if anybody wants to address us here at the meeting. I think that we could have approached this in a way that seemed a little bit more open. Fairness, as far as the address verification, and I, for one, am one that grew up in a split family, and so I know how awkward that can feel. So for me, rather than being even just more careful about how we go about it, my suggestion would be everyone in the district can submit a utility bill at whatever the cutoff date is, and why not have that for everyone? It kind of takes away the stigma that a split family might feel. When it comes to options, I was on the board when Clarks Grove was moved 6 years ago. And even though Clarks Grove does have a different zip code, they are tax-paying members of our district. We did cause them to move their school. They were not pleased with the process, or not the process itself, but that it had to happen. But they went along with it. When it comes to open enrollees, I know a statement was made at the special meeting that somehow we need to give them preference because they're choosing our district. I'm not of that same opinion. It's my opinion that we should not give preferential treatment to students that are open enrolling. I think our preferential treatment needs to be for our district students. So To me, an open enrollee, I think usually is not choosing a specific school. Usually, they're choosing the district itself, and I don't think it is as big of a situation for open enrollees to which school they go to. I really want us to choose something sustainable and something forward-thinking. At this point, I don't know how forward-thinking we were 6 years ago in moving a group of kids, and now having that same amount of kids basically have to move out. It feels very awkward as a board member, and I think that's all part of the process. If we did have more time to talk about this, it would maybe make more sense along the way. And you know, I wonder at some time if we do need to have a demographer come in and take a look at things closely. But from what I'm understanding, neighborhoods do flex. They go through different population periods where they do have younger children and then older and then younger again. So that I'm sure there will always be some flexibility. To me, looking at this new map makes visual sense because it looks more like a pie chart than the other one did. It just seems to make geographical sense there, where previously Sibley was that entire west side of the city, and there has been a lot of new growth. We also have Halverson all on the right side there, but apparently it's not causing a problem. And these boundaries were set years ago. I don't even know. It was before my time. But as far as that makes visual sense at least. Apart from that, I know this is a difficult situation. We heard 6 years ago the Clarks Grove families, and we heard about the tears and how hard it was, you know, for kids to leave their schools and move into one that they're not familiar with, and maybe meet some kids that they're not as familiar with. And I guess I'll just reiterate now what I had said then, is that usually kids will be okay if the parents are okay. If the parents are looking at it in a way that, you know, this is going to be okay, we can cope, we can manage with it, the kids usually will feel the same way as well, and maybe will bring them some comfort along the way. Having said that, I never had to go through this with my kids. My kids never had to change a school district, and I'm sorry that it's only a certain percentage of kids that are having to switch, because I do know it has to be difficult. But one thing that really stuck out to me at the special meeting was, with this group of families and this parent involvement, I know this group of families will benefit whatever school you're in, and so I thank you for that, for being that kind of parent, that kind of family. And I guess finally that it is very important to me, and I know the board as well, that we do have similar experiences across our elementaries, and that we do try to make those elementary experiences for kids, for staff, equivalent, you know, as equitable as we can, as similar as we can. Thank you.
Okay. Neil, did you?
It appears that we're to the point where we're discussing this, so it might be appropriate to put a motion on the table so we can have a discussion, an appropriate discussion. So in that spirit, I will move to approve.
Is there a second to the motion? Second. Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion?
Yeah. As I said at that informational meeting, I can't imagine anybody who is content with the current arrangement. The underpopulation of one of our elementary schools and the overpopulation of another is just not acceptable. And so, as I said, it all boils down to who's going to move. And there's no pleasant solution to that, or answer to that question. Something has to be done to equalize the population of these schools. And I can add, I suppose, long ago, It was, I experienced a worse situation, this with 3 of my 4 children. Their school got closed. Hayward Elementary was closed, and so they were moved to Halverson. We had some wonderful staff at Halverson, and I never asked them if that was a hardship for them. We were not happy with that arrangement. Mostly, we were not happy that our neighborhood school was being closed. So that's, if it's any consolation, those people who are affected by this, it could be worse. You know, your neighborhood school could be taken from you, and I'm not arguing. I wasn't too happy about that move at the time, although I could see the handwriting on the wall. Our student population was diminishing significantly, and so it'd be unrealistic to keep all of our buildings open and all of them undersubscribed. So again, something had to be done. My point is that there are worse things that have to be done than what's happening now. And I would also, I guess my final comment would be that I'm assuming that we have been monitoring the population at our various schools over the years. It would be my suggestion that we would increase the intensity of those observations so that we can maybe make micro adjustments annually, regularly, rather than waiting until we have to make a drastic adjustment. And I don't know, maybe that's not practical or possible, but if it seems to me if we have micro adjustments that need to be made, we can perhaps enter into some sort of agreements with the people that are involved that might not be as painful. You know, we may find some solutions to small problems that would not be a problem for the people involved.
Okay. Any other discussion? I guess my comment would be this is a difficult decision, but a decision has to be made to be equitable to all students. I think that the thing that I saw at our meeting last week was that parents care about their kids, and that's always good to see, and those parents are also very involved in the school system, which is also fantastic. And so no matter what our decision is, I hope that I know they'll continue to care for their students, but I hope that they continue to be involved with the school, because parent involvement is very important. So with that, do we need a roll call? So, okay. We'll start with Kim. Aye. Okay. The motion to follow the recommendations is approved. Moving on to our study session, we have our activities discussion. Dr. Funk and our athletic director, Paul Durbin.
Come on up, Paul. So, Paul, it's interesting. I've heard from some board members about discussions with athletics, activities, community, boosters, and then I heard Paul talk about something very similar. And so I thought, okay, this would be a good opportunity for Paul to come in and really kind of lay out kind of what his vision is, at least initially internally within the activities department, and then how that will impact things community-wide. And then the other piece of that is we would like to hear some thoughts on middle school sports, and now that we will have a gym sometime late this fall, what we could potentially do there, and share some ideas and thoughts with the board on that. So the first thing I guess I would like to do is just kind of turn it over to Paul, and you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit what you've been thinking here, Paul.
Well, first, I want to say thanks for having me here tonight. I guess a little bit about the vision. I want to start and say I hope I can listen more than I speak tonight when we get into some of these topics, because I think some of the information that our board can provide will really help for direction moving forward. But to get to that vision, as I interviewed for the activities director position, I think I really tried to articulate what I felt that our district needed, and really focused around culture change within our activities department in our programs, and kind of got a sense after building relationships with other activities directors while in the interim role, and going different professional conferences of some programs that have done this successfully and gone through with different programs to try and instill a different culture within their activities. So one thing I saw is that we first need some horizontal alignment in our staff, amongst our coaches, administration, school board. As a school district, what do we see is the identity of Albert Lea activities, and that's where we need to start. Last Thursday I had a meeting with our head coaches. 17 of our 19 head coaches were 15 of our current 17 head coaches were present, and this was received very well from what I got back from our coaches on Thursday. I think there's some excitement behind it as well. So just moving forward, what I see is building with our coaching staff, identifying our purpose of why we coach. Really dig into that. Think about why we're coaches and why we're there. It's not always about winning and losing, but one thing I think in the past that we've kind of got hung up on is people felt like when we start talking about a positive culture in our programs, that winning doesn't matter, and that's not true. I mean, our kids are playing sports and in activities because they want to be successful, and so we can't lose those two different ideas. But our coaches really took to this idea of finding our purpose, our identity, and sharing that across the board as coaches in our program. And I think the next move then is to get all of our coaches on board. One thing we've done in the past, and I've been through it as a head coach, is we've met as head coaches routinely, but one missing element has been our assistant coaches. And they really drive our programs, and they're important to a lot of our kids. They impact a lot of the lives of our students. So getting our assistant coaches on board, establishing what's their role, how do they help build and feed into this purpose, overlying identity in Albert Lea activities. And then the next phase would be bringing this all to our student leaders, and then ultimately to our community. And that's when we go vertical. So we get to our youth programs, our junior high programs, community ed, parks and rec. We really, branch out. And so we got some pieces in place, some goals there, working on trying to develop a curriculum for our head coaches to help lead this. Another piece here is when we start establishing these meetings moving forward, it brings in a lot of other opportunities. One idea, I've been bouncing ideas off with our Freeborn County Partners of Prevention. Can we bring in some vape education for our coaches, our student leaders, our students, our families, the community? Can we start to educate people a little bit more to try and prevent some decisions down the road or poor decisions down the road? And then I've got some other speakers that are trying to line up to bring in to come just work with our coaches on how do we really make change in our programs. So, as we move forward on this, we can kind of dig into what that looks like a little bit more, but I think we've got a good platform to start with here. So. Yeah, so I think that's, Dr. Funk just asked me to talk about an idea of a summit, and this is one that I think our community can get excited about. I think we've done a pretty good job horizontally in the past working with all of our coaches, but we've never really brought it to our youth and to our community and to our booster clubs, and those relationships are important for the successes of our activities. So the idea is once we've kind of got a common language, a curriculum in place, our coaches, our student athletes are all on the same page, we have an Albert Lee Activities Summit. We invite as many people involved in Albert Lee activities as possible. Might be a pretty large undertaking. I got this idea from Hastings High School. They had a initiative where they hosted a summit. They were facing similar issues that we're facing in Albert Lee, which you know, the vertical alignment was the piece that they were missing. And I've been working with their AD, Trent Hansen, on gathering some ideas on how to make this work in Albert Lee as well. So we're still in the early stages, but it's part of the vision where we're going with this. So, any feedback or thoughts on that piece?
Yeah, you know my feelings on this. We've talked about it many times, as far as the purpose of high school athletics. And I take advantage of every platform I get. It was my happiness to have an opportunity to express my thoughts a couple of days ago, and this was part of my message, exactly what you're talking about. I think I made the statement that our purpose with our activities, with our sports activities especially, our purpose is not to produce winning teams. It's to teach student athletes how to be winners. And the winning, you know, as you say, it's important. I mean, we play to win because that's consistent with our goals. But our purpose is not to have championship teams. Our purpose is to instill with our student athletes and our students in general what it takes to be a champion. And that's true whether you're on an athletic field or whether you're in a geometry class. You know, the purpose is the same. We are providing students with the machinery so that they can be successful in whatever they do. And that machinery is rather general and has connections no matter what it is that you plan on doing, whether you want to be a brain surgeon or a drywall contractor. You know, the skills that you need, the techniques are different, but the general basic approach, attitude, that's the same. And you're right. I totally agree. This can't be something that students trip over when they get into a varsity program. This should be introduced to them as early as possible. And we need, you know, but for that to happen, we need to have our staff, the people that are charged with educating our student athletes and our geometry students. They all need to be on board, so that we are consistent in the approach that we take in trying to improve the ability that our students have to achieve success. Long ago, at a tournament in Casson, just happened to be Casson. This is what I usually do, you know, after a weigh-in and you have time in your hand, and walk around the building and see what's there, you know, and look into classrooms, just check out their educational system. And like most schools, they had catchy slogans on the walls, and one that caught my attention was a quotation from Aristotle to the effect that excellence is not an event, it's a habit. And winning, being successful in geometry or wrestling or, you know, football or whatever, it's not an event. It's not you know, it's a result of a habit, and that's what we need to instill on our athletes and our students in general.
So Neil, you and I agree that the attributes of a successful student, successful person in life are the same attributes of our athletes if we want them to be successful.
Absolutely. And we need to impress upon our students, our athletes, the members of our community, that what we do in educating their children is to teach them how to pursue excellence in everything they do. And it's no different in the classroom than in the practice field or practice room. Same approach.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on, I like what you mentioned about the verticalness of it. I remember in the interviews you talked a lot about that, and that's, it's, I don't wanna say it's been ignored before. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if baseball, if the highest level baseball in the town of Albert Lee is high school baseball, that coach is the entire city coach for baseball, or should be responsible, just using that as an example. My question is kind of one phase on that and one also on the assistant coaches. Give me a little bit of a timeline, Paul, because I mean, like I say, it's been kicked around, and I'm not pinning you to 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 years, but, you know, we talk about this, you know, and I mean, then we get booster clubs that come into play and all this kind of stuff. So just comment on that, and then I'll ask you about assistant coaches next.
Well, first, this is dangerous. I don't want to paint myself into a corner. But roughly, what I'd like to see happen, and a lot of it's going to be based on whether we can get some supporting curriculum to really guide our coaches. There's a couple pieces that we're looking at right now, and the timeline with availability on that is going to dictate some of the schedule. But the way I was looking, I've kind of mapped it out. Continue meeting with head coaches into early June. So we've got a meeting this next week as head coaches to start discussing our purpose. And then we're going to have another meeting establishing our 5 pillars, if you will, 5 non-negotiable pieces that are going to guarantee a winning culture in Albert Lee. And that's going to be unified across our activities. How is each sport program, and so as Neil mentioned, each sport or activity or everything's going to be different in how they support those 5 pieces and how they guarantee that within their program. If you're in the wrestling room, ensuring that a quality is met or an expectation is met, it might look different than if you're on the football field or on the stage, right? So we'll meet and start discussing those ideas. Timeline moving forward then, bringing all of our coaches together, assistants and head coaches, hopefully over the summer, find a day to rally the troops, if you will, get everybody together. And the purpose there would be, okay, assistant coaches, how do you see your role to support these pieces? What's your role look like if we're going to guarantee a winning culture in Albert Lee? And start to really internalize what our roles are as coaches. And then the next step is to bring our student leaders on board. Our captains and prospective captains, future captains, any students that look like leaders moving forward in Albert Lee, we get them on board with some of the common language pieces and some of the same education that our coaches are going through. Hoping for, the early workshop days with our staff is, prior to the school year, but when our staff is coming back to work. And then I'm hoping that we can get to a point maybe in September where we host a summit. And that's very, that's a stretch, right? That's a stretch to get there, but that's the goal. So.
And then just a quick thought. I'm glad to hear that someone has taken some interest in our assistant coaches, because as you said, they're just as integral as a head coach that's organizing the whole group. It's the assistants that have a little bit more contact with our kids. What do you see as your role in that? I mean, I know you want the head coaches to pick the right people, but I mean, are you going to put together maybe a pillars type situation where, and I guess I'll just use the example. Let's say there's 3 assistant coaches we're hiring, and there's 5 people that apply, and there's 2 that would meet your standards. What would your philosophy be behind all 5 then? Just a thought. Not pinning you down.
Well, so this all, in my eyes, provides us opportunities for, it'll help us in our hiring practices. It'll help us guide us in our professional development. It'll help us in our evaluations of our coaching staff. And so moving forward, we're going to have these 5 pillars, or 3 to 5 pillars, wherever we come up with as a school system here. I mean, school board, administration, we hope that you're all going to be involved in this process as well. This isn't just going to be behind closed doors. We want involvement. But the pillars are going to help guide us in hiring processes, professional development, and evaluations as well. So.
Question I have is something that I think came out during our referendum was involvement from booster clubs and so on. And so I guess my question would be, how do you see that fitting together?
Well, I'd have to say our booster clubs are very supportive of our programs, and I'd like them to see big picture as well as we move forward with this initiative and this vision. But you know, I come from a wrestling program where we have a strong booster club. You know, we're doing well financially with our booster club, and they're very supportive of what we're doing. And I hope to try and guide other booster clubs to get to the same place, and help guide booster clubs in how they can help our programs as best as possible. And I'm fully aware that developing relationships with each of those clubs is very important, and I intend to try and get there. So.
I think you bring up a great point. I think there's tons of booster clubs that are strong, but there hadn't been that necessarily partnership piece. And so the coaching staff with wrestling and their boosters is strong. And I think that's the component that you talk about that's maybe missing in some sports. And so, and activities, you know, it's not, I don't think it's a coincidence that our music program's strong when they have a huge support piece from their boosters, what I would call their boosters, their parent supporters. Our robotics is seeing significant support from their parent group. And you could talk about that. I think your vision is so exciting as someone who's had children in a lot of different activities, to see that that's the vision, and this idea that if you win as a student athlete, then the winning comes. And so I think that's great. And I think if all the coaches are on the same page, and I agree too with you know, I think we have a lot of strong youth programs and summer sport type programs, and I think there is some disconnect with the community in that some of those do really well, and then when they get to school sports, they don't do as well. And I think having that summit and having everybody involved, the transparency piece and why that happens is going to be so important. I'm just really excited about this direction, and I'm full support, and I will definitely be involved.
I want to make sure that it's clear that I don't feel like I have all the answers, right? And that's the purpose of the summit. And get to that point where, what does our community feel, and what do we feel we need what does the high school feel we need, and we start working together and to try and, you know, meet some of those goals. So that's the idea.
So my question would be, what are we looking at for adding middle school, junior high sports? That's something I've heard from a lot of community members. They want the district to have more sports in the high school level.
So I think we're pretty early in the conversation from my standpoint of being a new hire here. I fully understand the value of middle school and junior high sports. They help retain numbers and participation. It gives you a safe environment we can kind of control some of those pieces. What I've started to do recently is kind of dig into which other schools still can provide middle school sports, what other area schools and conference schools. I don't have a full set of data, but I hope to soon, and we can probably share that with the board if we're starting to look at that discussion and move on that. I do have some numbers, but not a whole lot where I feel confident to talk a lot about it. But I see value in junior high, middle school sports, and you know, I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. So,
I think that, just to add to that, when we were doing the gymnasium at Halverson, a key part of that was that we would add back some junior high athletics. We were lacking gym space, and I know when we had our facilities presentation that was a part of it. So just to pass on to you, that's an important part, I think, that the board expects going forward is, you know, we have dance line Southwest because they need that size of gymnasium. And so, it's hard to have more than one thing going on at a time. And one of the thoughts behind the Halverson School was that it would allow us to add on, to make a change there.
Yes, so going through the winter months as the interim AD really opened my eyes to how much of a hot commodity gym space was. And we'd have basketball teams coming in at 6:30 in the morning to get their practice in because we'd have back-to-back practices with basketball and dance late into the evening. And so to have the boys and girls basketball teams and the dance team all looking for gym space, and then all of our youth and junior high programs that are also vying for space, it was getting to be difficult to find appropriate space for all levels. And so the gym in Halverson, which I believe the goal is to have that somewhere in October or November next year available. That winter season, it should be very nice to have that space. So, but I'd like to hear more from the board about their feelings on the middle school, junior high. I think I could use some direction and in that area.
So I was on the board when we decided to not have those, and I, you know how your hindsight's 20/20, and I would probably not make that same decision today. But I think part of the piece that you talk about with the summit, getting the community involved and working out those, some junior high sports are going to look different than others based on what might be happening club-wise in the community, and I think those two don't have to be separate. Those can be part of one program, and how does that look? And I think there's not a one-size-fits-all for every activity, and so, but I think that your summit kind of thing will bring some of that out, but I feel that there definitely is a feeling in the community that we maybe made that a wrong decision there. And I know at the time there was a, yeah. Okay.
That is, okay, I mean, twice tonight I've heard board members say, okay, well, we could have done something better historically, all right? Here's where we're at, okay? We had gym space issues back in 2011 that we had community teams into the night, all right? And it was really, there were two issues that were driven. One was space, the other was overlap. Okay, we had a lot of programs that were, and I'll give you baseball as an example. We had to end baseball season early in the spring because our kids were now playing nights baseball instead of playing junior high baseball. So we'd be scheduling games, and well, we got to go practice with the Knights. We can't practice with the junior high anymore. So it wasn't just a clean cut, we want to cancel junior high sports. The other thing that I really want to bring up is it was not financially driven at all. I've heard that rumor in the community for years. We did not cut junior high sports for finances. It's minimal. Space was the driving issue, and really playing time for students. And now space is not an issue anymore. And as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a board member last week saying, you know what? Maybe we want to take over at the middle school level some baseball for some other reasons instead of what we're doing community-wide. So you can maybe think in hindsight it was different, but the reality of the time was that's why the board was pretty solid in their recommendation back in 2011.
I guess my point was more about when I was sitting there and had the information I had, that was I'm in support of that decision, but we saw that instead of the community and the school coming together to find a solution, the school made the decision to just stop. And I'm not saying it was necessarily at the time the wrong decision, but that's why this summit type information or resource is so important, because then you can kind of work through those things. Why was the Knights baseball happening? I know several kids that got lost in that gap that didn't have the opportunity to be in Knights baseball and didn't have a community or a school baseball option. So I'm not saying, I guess my point meaning, if we could have done more as it relates to this concept, that's more of what I was saying, yeah.
Sounds like a classic case of a failure to communicate, and you knew the job was tough when you took it, so that's going to be part of your task to coordinate and communicate so that we don't have it. I think that was another point I made a while back. We are all on the same side, and it's ridiculous for people in this community to have competing programs, competing for students, competing for space, for the same activity. That doesn't make any sense at all, so good luck with that.
Well, in all cases, it's, there's no cruel intentions there. They're trying to, it's all in the best interest of their students and their kids. And so when we get everybody together, hopefully some of the concerns come forward and some positive discussion will guide us in the right direction, so.
Well, I think there's always been a challenge with traveling versus non-traveling in a lot of sports.
And that was some of the leadership, again, as you mentioned, the verticalness should help that out, because that, without mentioning anything, that was just leadership that decided they wanted to pull some of those kids away from our spring activities. But, yeah, as I've seen, you know, as I was, and I don't, you probably don't remember right offhand, Paul, but, you know, we used to use Hawthorne School routinely, and I don't know if they are used every night. You know, now we'll have Halverson as a full gym space. We got 2 gym spaces at Southwest. We got 2 at the high school. I mean, we're starting to get more, and it is the winter that is bringing, you know, the biggest scheduling problem. But I don't know, was Hawthorne used? Is it utilized? You know, back years ago, that's where the dance team went. The dance team decided they needed 2 courts because they had 2 teams. And I just wondered if it was used as much. I know we played at Lakeview. I mean, that's a junior high gym at best.
Correct me, does Hawthorne, is that the gym with the wood floor in Hawthorne? I think the dance team, if not this last year, in the past, has preferred a wood floor to practice on at times. And so I think that has been used. Don't quote me on whether it was used this past season extensively. I do know this, the elementary gymnasiums are being used heavily with elementary activities and after-school activities, and so they also have desires to fill those gyms up, and so there's needs for the extra space. The other big thing with Halverson is now we can have a full-size basketball space in there, so that's going to be a little more desirable for a basketball team to practice in that environment, and it should free up more gym space. So I look at it as a nice luxury to have this upcoming winter, yes.
All the closed days, so when we could get practice in, it was like, okay, you know, everyone's competing for the tight practice space.
Sometimes scheduling, and I wouldn't want to add more to your plate, but scheduling gets to be as simple as if I called first, I get the gym space or whatever space, kind of like we had out here a little bit with soccer, and then, oh, that's mine now for the rest of the year. Sometimes maybe it should be done 2 weeks at a time, so we give some rotations in there too for other teams.
So my understanding is in the past, high school activities have taken a precedence, and amongst the high school activities, we've established rotations in with girls and boys basketball or in indoor baseball, softball season, they'll rotate, and so some rotations have been established, but I think, yeah, we could dig deeper and provide more structure, yes.
So it's sounding like that summit's going to be a key piece in figuring out what the community actually has, how everyone wants to work together, and what the district should offer. So like after the summit possibly in September we're looking at, maybe after that we can have you back and have another discussion about junior high, middle school athletics right after that, and kind of see going forward. I know the community's really wanting middle school, junior high sports, and I know that like when we talked about the Halverson gym, we talked about we could add this, so I think we need to make sure this discussion continues, but I understand that this summit may be a key piece in determining that, so I don't maybe want to do it before then.
So I agree. Speaking with Hastings after their summit, I think it's been over a year and a half. And they still are organizing meetings based off of their initial discussions because it's created so much more discussion. And so I think we got to be realistic about our timelines as well, and just it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a process, but I think they've started a very healthy process in providing direction for their programs there after their summit. So I would welcome the opportunity to come back and talk about this at any time. So.
Yeah, and in that vein, Paul, in addition to coming to this body and reporting to us what progress is being made, I think it would be useful if one of us would be involved in the process of progressing. So when you have meetings with head coaches or staff or whatever entity you are going to put in motion to achieve these goals, include...
Our coaches have requested that the school will be involved in this process because they value that.
Yeah, the school board member, or we'd like to have some input rather than just hear about it when it's realized or when it's in progress.
It would be welcomed.
Okay, well, to keep
The
that in
summit
mind.
level would be the appropriate spot for the board. Paul, I don't want to have, I'm going to speak for you here. Okay, I don't think you're going to want to have board members at your coaches' meetings. Okay, moving forward here. But I think the appropriate level is when we talk with the community folks. That's where the board represents us.
I think it would be good to get together again, when we have more community feedback about the Southwest direction. A couple questions. So you mentioned you're going to be working on the pillars, and I've received concerns regarding the coaching culture. And in the short term, what philosophies or priorities do you have when it comes to hiring coaches as you are feeling?
Well, I guess I want to make sure that it's clear that a positive culture is the number one priority. And when we're looking to hiring coaches, we want somebody that's going to provide the best opportunity for our student athletes and our students involved in our activities. It's not all X's and O's, but somebody that can really provide a safe, nurturing environment and also facilitate that winning culture as well.
And regarding chemical use, I'm glad to hear that you are interested in the vaping education. I know Partners in Prevention and Family Services Collaborative have been wanting to get into the district with that. And I know that we had spoken at one of the community vaping educations prior to this regarding policies that we currently have in place, and you had mentioned maybe wanting to gather data before we make any changes. What are you thinking about our current chemical use policies?
Yeah, I'm a person that doesn't like to react without seeing big picture and analyzing data in a situation like this. And I think the big piece with chemical education is that the policy change, I think the intent was to educate and prevent repeat offenders and educate our students to not make poor choices. And I think we want to stand back a little and look at, is it working? And I think data can support that. And so that will take some time to gather. Looking at our old policy, looking at a new policy, what type of violations have occurred, and I think then we can make more informed decisions. I think I was reading recently, Prior Lake went through a similar adjustment to their chemical violation policy, and they're having similar discussions, and is it working or is it not? And so maybe we could join forces and look at how that's going there too.
And how about inclusivity? What are your thoughts about including as many students as we can in athletics and activities among different student groups?
We always want every student to get involved in activities, and so all inclusive. And I think if you you come out and you observe a little bit of our activities, you'll see a lot of that all inclusive piece. We promote that to the fullest. So. It's something to celebrate, I think.
Okay. I think I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
congratulations on your full-time position now,
Thank you.
and we look forward to making progress. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our next item of business is our 1920 health insurance rate renewal. Dr. Funk.
This is for information tonight. You'll do the formal approval at the regular board meeting in a couple weeks here. The rates are going up, and really the primary reason that we have an increase in insurance is utilization. When we have big ticket items that drive claims, that's when our rates go up. So that is the premium difference, single versus family, on a monthly basis, this year to last year, or last year to this year. Next slide. And then here is the 9-year average of where we've been with the various increases, decreases, flat. Last 3 years have been an increase, which is not a good trend. But again, this is driven primarily by usage. The on-site clinic does help us reduce the overall. I don't have the exact percentage in front of us, but this is the trend direction is not going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, it's driven by big ticket items typically. So questions on any of that?
Is this the year, I can't always get my years wrong,
I think it
that
is.
we get the PEEP bid and the
I
other
think,
insurance
yeah, I believe
bid?
so. Yep.
Okay, that'd be interesting to compare all of that data
Right.
when it comes
And
in.
they requested data from us. Oh, you weren't on that email, Kathy? They did request data from us though. And I haven't seen
I
what they
think-
did.
I was gonna say, another trap we fall into is with the 0% increases. Anytime there's 0, that means there's probably gonna be double the next year.
Could
You know,
be.
I mean, we only had it twice in there, but I mean, sometimes maybe that's a leveling out that, I mean, and I
Right.
don't like to see mine go up in anything either. But if we can ever help that, maybe do a 2% instead of a 10 and a 9, you know, just a thought.
Right. The other piece of it is we've been in with NJPA for a number of years now, and one of the things we can look at is potentially going out and seeing what Blue Cross Blue Shield or what one of the other co-ops would be able to do, or health partners themselves at some point in the near future here. Well, the near future being the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you for the information. Next, we're looking at a closed session under Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 2. Is there a motion to go into closed session? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.